Thank you, Greg, for being with us today.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
So we, as Laurent mentioned earlier, we all know reputation of Wieden when it comes to storytelling, and you all remember the great campaign Wieden+Kennedy ran for decades around Nike, Heineken, and more. So maybe first, to introduce yourself, you can maybe tell us a bit about yourself very quickly, about your background.
Sure. So I've been at Wieden+Kennedy Amsterdam now for 9 months. I started in our Portland office, and I'm going to show you a bit of the World Cup campaign that I worked on while I was there. But in between, I spent a year and a half in Tokyo working in what was a very different market there compared to either of those. But my background is in journalism. So I actually went to journalism school and worked at Business Insider when it was a very small company, about 15 people, helping to build an audience around finance and markets, getting up very early in the morning to cover all the crises that were happening in Europe at the time. So, but yeah, my passion's for football, and that's how I found my way to Wieden+Kennedy and to work on Nike.
Cool. So now we know a bit more about you. You can maybe tell us a bit more about Wieden+Kennedy. How do you work? How you're organized to work on digital and craft those great campaigns?
Sure. So I think what's interesting about Wieden+Kennedy and how we're organized around digital is that it's always changing. Every week there's some potentially new division or new department that's created to kind of deal with or face one of the challenges that we're up with. But they're very ad hoc, right? So we're all responding to what's coming up in the industry at the time. Right now in Amsterdam, we have a department that's combined comms and digital strategy. So it's a mix of digital media and social that we bring together to kind of come up with strategic insights for the work that we do, as well as collaborate really closely with creative teams. So the responsibility of that group is to be almost a third person, a third wheel in the traditional art director, copywriter, creative team, which is the most fun part of my job, that level of collaboration. But then across the network, we have other groups. So we have a creative technology group in Portland that is just assigned to building things, and then other offices have other things as well. But yeah, we get to work on some amazing clients. I mean, obviously Nike is the one I think that stands out to everyone, but now in Amsterdam we work on Corona, who's owned by AB InBev, which is an amazing brand. It's nice to go on shoots for them because it's always at a beach. So it's a very lucky position to be in.
Okay, but we are on the same page, on the same boat, working facing the same challenges with digital and social media. Tell us frankly, please. Honestly, yeah. What are the best challenges for Wieden+Kennedy? Because we all know that it's a great advertising agency, but when it comes to digital, when it comes to make those thing happen on the social media, on Twitter, and everything, what are the best challenge you are facing with the creative, with the planning, strategic planner, etc.?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge we face, and I'm sure you all face it too in your daily jobs, is this division between craft and speed, right? If we come from an organization that throughout history has made a lot of really great television spots with a lot of great directors, and we have an obsession with crafting those things to perfection. And sometimes when you work in digital, it's not about how perfect it can be, it's how fast it can be, it's how current it can be, it's how responsive it can be. And so building an environment where creatives feel comfortable that that's a place where they can make mistakes, they can do different things, they can take chances is extremely important. And that's not just an internal thing, it's a challenge with clients too, right? Because clients come to expect a certain thing from you as an agency, and know when you tell them, okay, you need to sit outside this room and we're gonna have 3 writers in here and 1 art director who's gonna be making something in real time in response to something, they're like, but wait, where's the 8-hour approval process? How come I can't put it through all these different things? So for us, it's that balance between craft and speed, and I think everyone faces that, but we certainly feel that on a daily basis.
Okay, so, and for example, do you have an example of a recent work? It was like maybe very hard to do or very easy, so some...
Yeah. I mean, I think we're testing new platforms all the time, and we're doing more things live. And we tried in the previous months to set up a couple different live projects, and unfortunately they didn't work because the idea of having a client on site to review with no review timing and no lawyer was not yet in their capacity. So what we find is that we have to build backwards, right? So if you want to do something live, you need to be giving them a 6-month plan, a roadmap to how we're going to get there with the right people in the room to do it. That was the same thing for the World Cup campaign, in that we had a command center of 200 people, but it took 18 months of planning to actually get us there.
So yeah, that's great insight. So yes, about live and storytelling and data. Maybe you can tell us a bit more, like how do you get insights when do you do listening, social listening? Do you is there in the strategic planning division some playing with data now? Tell us how you work and come up with this great program.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely, we use platforms like Crimson Hexagon, which you all do in terms of doing social listening to find those things out. But what we're really looking for is, I guess from a strategic perspective, we tried to find the cultural purpose of that brand, where they should be living in the world, what they have a right to say, where they have a right to be. And then our job when we're listening to what's happening is finding those things that actually fit within that gives us a right. So for instance, with Corona, we're working really hard now to find our way into the world of surf and do it in a legitimate way. Which very much means like we're not a sports brand, we're a beer brand, so we're not an athletic drink that you're going to be consuming while you're actually surfing. We are instead a brand that has a viewpoint on what you do after surf. So we need to think critically about those moments and those places and listen into the events that are happening out in the world to do that. In terms of data, we're always looking to better understand our audience in that respect. So the actions and the things that they're fascinated in and the influencers that they really speak to and who we want to have incorporated in our campaign. So casting 5 or 6 years ago would have nothing to do with the people that people are most engaged with and or any of that. But now it's very much thinking about that and building out a group of influencers or an identity around the brand and the people that are actually a part of it.
And it is working, really?
I think it's working. I think with Nike we're really lucky, right? Because with Nike you have a cast of athletes already that people connect to, and so building out that group is super important. But I won't say that it's always working. I think the biggest thing, we're constantly challenged there in terms of whether or not we're pushing things in digital enough as an agency. That's mainly every note that falls on my desk most days is like, how can you do more? How can we be more aggressive in terms of how we innovate and how we do things? But yeah, we try.
Okay. So it's a good transition with Nike. When we prepare this meeting, you say, yeah, I have a great experience, big experience with the World Cup. I want to share, so maybe you can start with the clip and talk about it. So yeah, it's impressive. Like it's big, a really impressive craft for this. So, but can you tell us a bit more about how did it start? Where did it come from? Why did you decide to try to own the moment with this kind of property? And also, it was like 4 years ago, so maybe there is new thing to. In
some ways, this was a really long time ago. It started with one chart about 4 years ago. If you go to the next slide and just feel free to build it in. But at the time, no one really understood this whole real-time thing between the World Cup 2010 and 2012 and the European Championships when we suddenly realized, oh, wait a minute, people are using Twitter, people are using SMS to talk in real time around an event. And this seems super primitive to where we are right now, obviously. But in 2012, it was like, whoa, this is big news. So we all had a big conference in Brazil where we sat down and said, okay, we need to do something about this, which I think is what every brand did ahead of the World Cup in 2014. But what we really dialed into was, okay, what could possibly make you stand out? What are we going to have that other people don't? Because anyone can have a picture of an athlete, right? Anyone can take a picture of an athlete from a Getty image, put a line over it, call it an ad that you put on in real time during the World Cup. But what we knew is that if you had a visual template, if you had something that no one else could steal from you, if you had a design language that was your own, that was owned by the brand for that whole month, then you had an advantage. And that was the form of what we did with animation. That's why we went that route, because it meant that every time during the tournament we can do that. Little did we know there would be a huge animation like innovation 6 months before the tournament that let us get people into puppeteering suits and dance around and actually make these videos in real time for us. We made about 200 of those videos you saw with Zlatan and kind of the puppeteering motion in real time in the moment. And we were able to do that because they designed an environment for us to be able to do that, and the technology just like actually happened. We walked into a room at the animation studio and we're like, what's this? And it happened to be that. So it gave us a huge platform to talk in real time, and Twitter was our place for that, and we knew we wanted it to have like a back and forth communications element. So we had an Ask Zlatan hashtag where people were able to submit simple questions to us, and then we were able to create videos in response. And I think people were really blown away by the fact this is animation, but it's happening 2 hours after I submitted this tweet, and even at night, like after a match, we were able to create sort of responsive content to what had happened during the day.
It's a good example of live storytelling back in the days.
Back in the day.
And so now, do you industrialize this kind of insights? So when you think about strategy and maybe when you think about the future, the next challenges for everybody, like when it comes to live storytelling, etc. Do you have like a new strategy organization around it, or it's still the beginning? Tell us about it.
No, I think with this campaign, we did a live Google Hangout with the animated version of Zlatan, so kids were able to be in a Google Hangout situation live. At the time, that was really the only live platform that was happening, and we sort of wanted to test it out and try it. We are getting more and more requests to be as live as possible as we can be in events, and you know, one of the conflicts within is how are we actually interesting? And I think what you've seen over the last year in terms of what live content looks like is it doesn't take much. You can have a watermelon wrapped in rubber bands and people will suddenly get excited to see what's going to happen next with it. But for a brand, it's like, okay, well, what can we unlock? What can we look at that we haven't before? What do we have access to? And some of our brands like Corona have festivals, so that's definitely an opportunity. They have relationships with sports, so you can do live events. But it's really about thinking, and I think this is going back to the craft versus speed challenge that I talked about before. There's another challenge, which is audience versus brand. And it's really thinking about what people want to watch and want to be involved in. And that's where doing the data digging, looking into the insights, seeing what your audience actually cares about is hugely important, and having that incorporated in the brief. Because before, that was like the after effect. Okay, how do we make people interested in this? Now we have to really see what people are interested in the first place before we ever go around actually writing a brief and getting to the actual work. So I think that's part of the story as well.
Thank you very much, Greg.
No problem. Thank you, everybody.
And Greg will be after if you want to talk about with him.